Good evening. Thank you so much for coming to our first Live from the Library program in 2012. My name is Kristen Anderson. I'm the Executive Director of the Library Foundation. And on behalf of the Board of Directors and our fabulous Live from the Library Committee, I want to just thank you all for coming and welcome you to the library. We are so pleased that we have excellent libraries in Walnut Creek, and we have a community that really cares about the libraries. They not only came together to help fund the building of the library, but 10 years ago in 2002, they voted for extra hours so that our libraries are open 56 hours a week, which is different from many of the communities around us. We're very thankful for that, and I thank you for being library supporters. We have a very fun program tonight, but we also have two upcoming Live from the Library programs you might want to put on your calendar. On March 5th, and this is a bit of a coup, Adam Johnson will be here to discuss his new book, The Orphan Masters Sun. It's a searing fictionalized account of life in North Korea, and it's been called the 1984 of our era. It's garnering critical raves and moving quickly up the bestseller list. It's going to be a very popular program, just like this one. And if you are signed up for our e-news, you'll get advance notice of when to sign up, and I'm going to do the registration beginning next week, and I am going to send an email to people on my list to give them advance notice. So if you haven't signed up, please do so, and remember to sign up for the programs. In April, we're celebrating poetry again this year. On April 26th, please join us for a reading and discussion with award-winning poet Camille Dungy. She's a fabulous woman, and I want to thank Tom Donahoe for bringing her to the library this year. As you may notice, this program is being filmed by Walnut Creek TV, and they will broadcast it next week at various times. I will list the times on my website. You can also go to the Walnut Creek television website or look on your TV listings to see what channel you have, if you've got Comcast or Sound, where you can find WCTV and you can see this program again. And also, from what I hear, you flip the channels and you're bound to find a Live from the Library program within a few days, which is very nice. So thank you, gentlemen. Tonight, we're here to celebrate China. This is the Year of the Dragon, if you don't already know, and it started on January 23rd.
I have my red on.
Yeah, I have my red on.
Very good.
And we're very pleased to have Dr. Yip with us this morning. Dr. Yip was born in Singapore, and he came to America and received his PhD and then MBA from USC in the 1970s. For 10 years, he worked with the Singapore government in economic development and technology management, his top position being Executive Director and Administrator of the Singapore Science Park. He was appointed to Singapore's Deputy Ambassador to the EU and the Vatican in 1989 through 91. He was visiting professor at Northwestern University and also taught at Kellogg Graduate School of Management. Dr. Yip lived in China between 1994 and 2001, where he worked as general manager of an environmental technology startup and later as a trainer consultant in project management. So he knows his stuff. He returned to the Bay Area in 2001 and has taught courses at University of San Francisco. And since 2008, he's been teaching 3 courses in the Stanford Continuing Studies program. This is the problem of not having reading glasses.
Okay. Doing business in China. Doing business in China.
The course at Stanford is Doing Business in China.
Project management.
And he has written 3 books on China and published numerous articles on China in technical as well as business journals. He's also an experienced traveler and photographer. He lives on the peninsula, and we are very pleased that he made the journey to Walnut Creek tonight. And we also have question cards, and if you have a question for Dr. Yip, I'll be collecting those in a little while. So thank you very much and welcome.
Thank you. Firstly, I have to thank the Walnut Creek Library for inviting me here. It's just an awesome library, just fantastic. I'm very pleased to be here. Before I start, it's always good to have a little bit of knowledge of, you know a little bit about me. What about if I know a little bit about you? Those who were born and or lived in China or Hong Kong or Taiwan, can we have some show of hands? Okay, oh, we have a number. And the next question will probably have a lot of hands. Who has visited China at least once? At least once. Okay, that's good. That's fine. That's good. So we have a mix of different kinds of people. And I have been giving talks in the peninsula and Rotary clubs and all that. My favorite topic was the Silk Road. Later on, you'll know that I'm actually so-called an expert in Silk Road. Talking about an expert, I read that the definition of an expert is somebody who knows more and more about less and less. If that's the case, I'm a real expert in China. Because I, in a way, I don't understand why I picked this topic. After I picked the topic, I said, wow, gee, talk about China, a topic that's so wide, so deep. And I picked 100 years. That's even worse. Now I got about 90 minutes to take care of that. So please forgive me. And I'm really going to stand humbly in front of you because I'm sure there are a lot of you here who has much more experience in China and some parts of China than I do. I bring in a bit of a good, I would say, a background which is very interesting, and she already said so. So my next slide would be just a little bit redundant. But well, firstly, I must say that I'm not a historian. I don't have a degree in East Asian studies. And it sounds rather disappointing, and maybe that's good because all I know about China is from first-hand, second-hand experience and from a love of China, which began in the second part of my life. My first part of life was physics, material science, project management, technology management, which I've done reasonably well, and it brought me around the world and into China. But beginning about 26, 27 years ago, or should I say 30 years ago when I first visited China in 1981. And then in 85, because I married into a Chinese family from Shanghai. And that began my really intense interest in China. And for the last 26 years, I've spent most of my pastime on China, in China, learning and studying about China. And being from Singapore, let me just briefly go through a little bit of my background, not that you need to know that much about it. But being from Singapore also helps because, who's been to Singapore here? Okay, as you know, Singapore is a very small country, but extremely diverse country with multicultural, multilingual, multi-religious background. And that allows me to be able to have a very diverse background. And when I visit China, I can see the diversity of it. Later, I'll show you a book I published with the Chinese Academy on ethnic groups of China. Let me dive straight into the topic. And right, this is going to be my agenda. I take this talk very, very seriously because firstly, it's a very long talk. It is good. That means I can say as much as I can, but it also means that I can make a fool of myself more times than if I'm only given 20 minutes or 45 minutes. But that's good. I always love a challenge. But this is the way I'm going to do it. The first 60 minutes will be more serious, historical, cultural, and the more serious stuff that we can put our teeth onto. And then we're going to stop for question and answer because most of the tough questions or other questions will be from the first 60 minutes of it. Then the last 15, 20 minutes, I'm going to treat you to Silk Road. Like I said, I'm an expert at Silk Road, and just my photography all over China. And it will be different. There will be no skyscrapers, no usual sights that you have seen, but looking through China from the eyes of somebody who loves China, but I'm not Chinese. So that makes me, in a way, have a different set of eyes. It's like I'm always in romance with China. It's my high school sweetheart that I'm forever thinking about, you know. So that's what's the agenda. Now, I'm going to, some of you, later on I'm going to say books, and this is a book I will highly recommend, and maybe Kristen could later on say something about this. And much of my material also is taken out of here. Not that I don't know, I have many Chinese books, I read Chinese of course, and other books you can use Wikipedia, you can use Google, whatever, but this is one of the, by far the best book I've ever seen. Can I say that, Christine? I will be donating this to the library, and this is my second book. Yeah. And I'm proud to say my sister-in-law has actually wrote the foreword for this book, and has nothing to do with my recommendation of this book. But it's a superb book. It's a DK, which is a British publisher, which is very good. And it gives you a very balanced, a very overall strategic view of China, everything Chinese, from culture, language, agriculture, architecture, food, religion, everything. And it's everything you know, you want to know about China. And this is some of the quotes that come out of there. We all come from different backgrounds. Some of you might be Scandinavian, some of you may be from Latin background or Jewish background, or whatever background. We are all proud of our ancestry. It's very hard to say who's better, who's longer, and whatever. But China and Chinese occupy a very special role, a place in world history and ethnicity. And this is said by a non-Chinese, right? Through all the bad things and the good things of China, somehow this Chineseness remained throughout 5,000 years of history. We have had the Egyptian is older, and the Babylonian and all that, and they have disappeared. And there are other ones that have really declined. The Romans, the Greeks, and the Portuguese, and the Spaniards, and even the British. I grew up under the British rule, and we're the British now, you know. So, and that's by far the only civilization, continual civilization, that maintained its strength through most of the decades. It's only one nation and one civilization, the Chinese civilization. In that sense, it's unique, if not the strongest or the best. So this is what is said. And tonight, I hope I can use the culture, the history, and what I know and observe about China and Chinese, and give you just a slight idea of how to look at China and Chineseness, and maybe even interpret some of the social, economic, political, even the topics under debate now, how to look at it from a Chinese point of view, a neutral point of view that will help China and America. Well, this is the map of China. This is not a big deal. However, if you read the book called Germs, Steel, and Guns, Steel, and Germs, it's an excellent book. What? Civilizations are determined by what? Geography, right? And now, I am to tell you why China is like that. If you look at this map without looking too much, we call ourselves 中国, the Middle Kingdom, and it is the Middle Kingdom. Because in the eastern side, the eastern side, all the deepest ocean in the world, the southwestern side, the highest mountains in the world you cannot cross. Even Alexander the Great couldn't get into China. And then the north is tundra and desert and whatever. The northwest also very inhospitable. So God gave China this piece of land, the Chinese this piece of land, to be originating and prosper, to start his culture and his language, his history by itself, basically undisturbed by other civilizations, right? The only main conduit of liaison is really to the northwest, through the Silk Road, which I'll later talk a little bit about. And I want to also remind you that China is a classic civilization state. America is a classic what? Nation state. Nation state is born out of the European in the whatever 500-600 years ago. But civilization state is very different. It's organized by language, by ethnicity, by culture, whereas the nation state is drawn boundary with a passport. All right? So that's the main difference between China and Chinese and American civilization. And I want to be original because you are here, you're spending the night tonight, half an hour, 1 hour, 1.5 hours with me. I have to be somewhat original, even though this is on record. So I put it on deep thought, and I come up with a couple of slides that if you're a psychologist or whatever, a historian, please forgive me because it's not been proven, but it's my view. Yeah? Okay, this is my view. When I put Viva, it's my view. Yeah? I started thinking about, let's think about Americans first. Americans have a past, but does it affect your present? Mostly not. Yeah, you know about Washington, George Washington, Lincoln. They like to talk about Reagan and all that. But does it affect your life today? Not really. And you don't have 2,000 years. You don't have 5,000 years. You have 300 years, right? So present is important, and future is important. Americans are always optimistic. Look at American movies. You're always winning. The boy always gets a girl, and the cavalry always rides in. Chinese are the worst. I say I hate Chinese movies sometimes. Why? At the end, everybody good died. But that's part of our training, you know what I mean, to be able to endure. We call 吃苦 later on. But look at the Chinese person. I drew this, again, this is not proven. If you're a psychologist, please forgive me. The present is small. The past is huge. It dominates part of our present. The future is important. Why? We are always thinking about our children, our future of the country, the civilization. You know, we endured the Japanese invasion and all that because we know one day it will be better. We endured Mao because we know he was going to die. You know, so it is this hope for the future. However, the past looms large, myself included. There's nothing we say. We talk in Chinese, and every other sentence we are saying a phrase, a saying, a proverb, which is never 200 years, 2,000, 3,000, you know, 1,000 years old. Always. We don't have the quote, Shakespeare said so. No, it's whatever, it's already gone back. Yeah? And I make the next slide just to emphasize. This is the Chinese, all right? So we Chinese have a lot of burden, a lot of baggage. It's history and culture. So sometimes I feel myself, even myself, walking around like that, all right? So, okay, it's a little bit of a, what to say, stereotyping, but now you have an idea why I'm launching into this thing about history and culture, so that to help you in a sense to understand the behavior of China and Chinese people, Chinese community. I would venture to say that China does not behave like a country. It behaves like a person, and have a lot of reason, and later on I'll go through some of them. Yeah? And all right, now we'll go through history, but how do you talk about 5,000 years of history? So I'm really segmented it, yeah, and I only make the main dynasties and main eras to note for you, all right? And for as a scientist, I want to tell you that the Chinese history is like a sinusoidal wave, okay? It goes good for normally 100, 200, 300 years maximum, and the emperor gets very bad and he got dethroned and it goes into a period of badness, and then somebody will be good and bring them out. Yeah. But however, Farid Zakaria wrote in an article and said, don't forget, if you are challenged by the rise of China now, don't forget out of the last 20 centuries, China was ahead 18 of those 20 centuries. In GDP, in population, in world power, if there's such a thing, all right? So do not say that, well, you know, China is rising and we should be scared about it. It's only taking its rightful place. It's now on this curve again. You know, dy dx is positive, it's going up. D square y, dx square is even higher. The rate of change is even higher. That's physics and math, yeah? So I'm going to dive straight into it because I don't want to go to Qing. You have seen the terracotta soldiers and all that. We know we don't want to talk about the Bronze Age and all the rest of it. It's not important, but let's start with the Han Dynasty, 223, because I'll talk a little bit about the Silk Road. It started with the Han Wudi, and then the Three Kingdoms. Later on, I'm going to recommend some books to read. If you need to read some books, the Romance of the Three Kingdoms will be very good. It tells you a lot about Chinese history, personality, culture. But let me dive straight into Tang. It's a major dynasty. It's probably the most prosperous and most well-known dynasty of China. Yeah? And even some of the southern Chinese, the Cantonese especially, if you're Cantonese here, what do we call ourselves? Tongyan, the Tang people. Although officially we are called Han people, the Han ethnic group, but the Chinese in Guangdong and Fujian province, we call ourselves Tangren, the Tang people. Yeah? Because at that time, that was when Tang Dynasty was the greatest. And that was when some of the civilization and religion went to Japan, for example. Yeah? Japan got its Buddhism and many of its dress and architecture from China during the Tang Dynasty. Yeah? All right, and then you know the 4 or 5 big inventions of the Chinese Song Dynasty: paper, gunpowder, rockets, and seismograph and all that. Some of them, when I teach a course called Technology Management or Product Management, Project Management, I will talk about this. But then sometimes I talk back to the Chinese. If we're so smart, why are we not the technology leader? Now, there are some reasons. Chinese people are very smart, invented a lot of things, but certain social, economic, dynastic reasons, you know, control the progress of science and technology in China. That's why Chinese nations as a whole, at least now, is still a little bit backward. Yeah. Right. You know a lot about Marco Polo, and yeah, he went during the Yuan Dynasty, and the Yuan Dynasty is one of the 2 dynasties of China ruled by a non-Han ethnic group. In this case, the Mongolians. So the Mongolians, when it was great, they were strong. They just sidestepped the Great Wall and went into China and ruled China just not so strongly. But during those years, Marco Polo from Venice, Italy, took a total of 2 trips to China, and the longest one is 17 years. Yeah, and he was, I kid my Italian friends. He brought all the pasta back, all the noodles and the raviolis and whatever back to Italy, and even pizza, if you don't believe it. Yeah. So through the Silk Road, by the way, through the Silk Road. Yeah. So that was made, and he wrote the famous travel story that really first time exposed the West to this fantastic kingdom or country in the East where things are so prosperous and so good. Yeah? And then Ming is another famous dynasty which is very good, and that was the first time that the capital was established in Beijing. So when most of you have been to Beijing, you saw the Great Forbidden Palace. It's not that old by Chinese standards, only 700 years, you know. So and when you go to Xi'an, everything is 2,000 or 3,000 years. Yeah. So for in Chinese calendar, the Forbidden Palace was not that old. But the first time the dynasty was moved to Beijing was from the Ming dynasty, partly because they defeated the Yuan. They know a lot of the threats are going to come from the north. So it's no good to have a capital in Nanjing or Hangzhou or wherever because it's too far away. By the time you notice it, it's already too late. Yeah? So that was Beijing. Right, Tibet, which was already conquered by the Mongols in the 9th century, became officially part of the Qing territory in 1751. And I think 1752, Xinjiang also was incorporated into the territory of Qing proper. But that's the last hooray of China. If you Google or Wikipedia, they will have, one Wikipedia will have China, just if you Wikipedia China, they will have an interactive map, and you can click Qing dynasty, the terracotta soldiers, where the territory of China is, and then you click Han, it's very big, it's into North Korea, into North Vietnam, yeah, and then you click another dynasty, it will show you the territory of China. And Qing, mid-Qing is one of the largest, and the Mongol was the largest, of course. Mongol had the largest empire in the history of anybody, but those are not stable. They just killed and plundered, and they just temporarily occupy Turkey, Iran, Babylon or whatever. But within some years they went back. But anything that's really incorporated into China proper, mid-Qing dynasty is one of the largest. And at that time, China looked like mulberry leaf, Shangye, yeah, it looked like. But now with Outer Mongolia gone to become a Republic of People's Republic of Mongolia, so the top part is cut off. Now it looks like a cock, a hen with the head pointing in the east and the tail on the Xinjiang and Tibet side, and the neck is and the breast is Shanghai and the Yangtze River, and the bottom, the feet part is Hong Kong and Hainan Island. That's how we call it. It's now like a gongji, yeah. So at that time, there's one of the last hooray, mid-Qing dynasty. And then I added this last sentence this morning. Not to make you feel bad. I've been working on this for hours and hours, and even at 2 o'clock I entered my last entry, which was, but soon, I stopped at Qing Dynasty in 1751. My last sentence was, but soon the seafaring European powers began to knock at the weakened empire's doors in the 19th century. Yeah. Why? Because I grew up in Singapore. Singapore was what? The British. And why did they need it? They have the East Indian Trading Company, and that was what made Britain so strong. And the East Indian Company, in case you don't know, if you calculate the GDP, was the largest company in the world by far, larger than Exxon, GM, or whatever combined. Yeah. Why? Because they were controlling all the rubber trade, all the spices trade, and then the opium trade. Yeah. So they have a lot of access to grind. And when there was a big trade deficit in the mid-Qing dynasty, just like now, in fact, even more. Why? The Europeans are buying what? Spices, silk, porcelain, and other stuff. Tea. Oh, I should not forget. The British had this habit of afternoon tea, and they were buying tons and tons and tons of tea. And then they have nothing that the Chinese want to buy in return. So the British were, any British here, rather scheming people. They say, oh, maybe we should make them want something that I can sell them. What about opium? So they devised this thing to start shipping opium in. And you know where they grew the opium? Anybody knows? India. So they used another colony. The British are very good at divide and rule. So they had India, they planted the opium in India, harvested them, cooked them or whatever, and then they shipped them first into Hong Kong and into Guangzhou and whatever, and kind of propagated them. And of course the Chinese got hooked. And then there was a rather irreversible trend, which was very, very bad for China. If you think the drug problems now is bad, you think about those days in China. And it was actually crippling the Chinese economy and the people. Nobody wanted to work, especially southern part of China. And then there was, I don't want to get into too much, we have a very famous magistrate, Ling Zeshui, Mr. Ling, the magistrate. He went there, collected the opium and burned them, all right, and then chased some British out or whatever, killed a couple or whatever. And you know how the British reacted. They sent in the fleets, they sent in the guns. And the ironic thing that the Chinese invented gunpowder, the Chinese invented fireworks, but they came back with bigger cannons, bigger guns, and bigger firepower, and just completely defeated the Chinese. And that was only the first Opium War. And the first Opium War, the Nanjing Treaty, China ceded Hong Kong in perpetuity. Later on, the second one, they ceded Kowloon and the New Territory, which was only due in 1997. Yeah? So this was the Opium War. Let me quickly go. And I don't want to go too much into it. Now, towards the later part of the 19th century, early part of the 20th century, I want to give you this historical background so that you know the Chinese have, it's like Germany between the First and Second World War. You understand what I'm saying? You know, I'm not justifying the rise of Hitler, but the rise of communism has to do with the rise of nationalism, has a lot to do with the poor state of China during the early 20th century, where it was just carved out. Yeah, I don't want to go into it. Japan was into Manchuria for a long time. The Russians had scheming on Xinjiang, and the British were into Tibet, trying to get to Tibet to become independent. The French were, I didn't even know the French were into Yunnan and all that. And any German origin, that's why we got the Qingdao beer from the Germans. Even my Chinese friend didn't know. The Chinese never had beer. The Germans introduced beer into Qingdao because they occupied Qingdao here. That's Qingdao, yeah? And this is Shandong province. Yeah? So China was basically carved out. And you can imagine if this happened to America. All right, so let's get to milestone. The Empress Dowager was the worst one to be around. And then the October 10th, 1911, that's why the Republic of China's National Day is October 10th. They had a revolution, but please don't forget that it was the first successful ones. They had numerous unsuccessful ones that a lot of revolutionaries were killed. Just like when you were fighting the British. It wasn't just the first one who was a winner, but that was the first time they won in Wuchang, which is now part of Wuhan. Yeah? And Dr. Sun Yat-sen, we thank the Bay Area. He spent his teenage years in Hawaii, and then he got the telegram from China that the Shanghai革命in Wuchang was successful. And he quickly tried to get back to China by ship, of course. And then he was elected as the president, and on January 1st, 1912, exactly 100 years ago, the Republic of China was announced. Yeah? But after that, there was a lot of problems still. It wasn't just smooth sailing like the American Republic was smooth sailing. And part of the problem is that because in the West, the news are different. I'm trying to say it's nice. So whenever you hear about Tiananmen, you think about the massacre in June 4th. But a lot of things that happened in Tiananmen, in front of Tiananmen, for 700 years. And one of the most famous things was the May 4th movement. What is the May 4th movement? It's an organization among the students, also the students, against old customs, and they want science, they want democracy. Sounds familiar, right? And also liberalism, leftist ideas started, and that brought in the communist ideas. Because at that time, they wanted to save the country. Because the country, even after the Republic of China, was continuing to go down the drain. There were warlordism. You know what's warlords, right? You take one place, another place, and they're all fighting among each other. Nobody wants a united country. So that was the problem. And there were some riots in the Tiananmen, and then indirectly communism started. Yeah? Now, a very bad, sad chapter of Chinese history is the Sino-Japanese War. It's basically a Japanese invasion, and they took up Manchuria for a long time already. But in 1937, on July 7th, they used an excuse to march cross the Lugochao and into Beijing and all over China. They started the major invasion of China. Right. Currently, you have a movie by Zhang Yimou, yeah, on Nanjing and the flowers of Nanjing, something like that. Yeah. So if you want to, you can watch that too. And the famous Nanjing Massacre is our Holocaust. Within a couple of months, 200,000 or 300,000 people were individually killed. So they were, if they're Japanese friends here, please excuse me. It was brutality that really scars the world, because it's not a massive extermination. Not that it's better, but it's an individual brutality. Bayonet, cutting the head off, and rape, and whatever. So that was really, really awful. And it looms large in today's Chinese psyche. And I teach a course called Doing Business in China. Once or twice I have a Japanese student, and I always bring them aside and say, you want to do business in China, you better study Chinese history, because this is just so raw. The scar is still raw. It's not even healed. It's not even a scar. It's an open wound. So if you want to work in China, you have to be very careful, even though the Chinese may not always be right. But remember what, sorry to say, you did to them. Yeah. So, right, Mao Zedong, and this is the Cultural Revolution, then that you read a lot about. But the kind of unsung hero is a short little man. 4'11", 4'10". If he comes in here tonight, he'll be shorter than most of the women here. But he was a giant of a man in the history of the 20th century, because he single-handedly liberated 600, 800 million Chinese from poverty, from hunger, from lack of freedom and whatever. Yeah. So this was a short little man that, by the way, had part of his education in France. Okay. So it was his Western exposure that gave him a lot of new ideas that allow him to do that. And of course, you know that tank man situation. Now, I always say that in China, I may not be able to use this particular photo, but we are in America, we use that. But we can go into that, but I don't want to get too much into it. But I brought my family back to Beijing for the Olympics, and it was a glorious few weeks, because looking back, I didn't know, because that was just before the downfall of the Western the financial thing. And it was just like the Chinese had a bar mitzvah, had a coming of age party, and then soon after that, you had a fall off. Yeah. So now the contrast is even higher. And in case you don't know, this handsome 6-foot-tall athlete won the world hurling champion in the Athens Olympics. And recently he's rated #1 again, and he may win it again. And it's a great thing for Chinese men, especially because we were told we were the weaklings of East Asia. 我们是东亚病夫. We are not only the weakling, we are the sick men of East Asia in the 19th century. We couldn't do anything right. And this was a champion that coming back. Now, 2009, China did very well, and right now it's doing well. Well, you may want to later on ask me about this, about the so-called Jasmine Revolution and all that. It didn't happen to China. Why? I have reasons so. There are some wishful thinking. They said, well, maybe it will happen to China. It will bring down the regime. Nothing even close. Yeah? There are a lot of reasons behind, because China is not Egypt. China is not Tunisia. China is not Syria. China is different. It has its problems, but not the same kind of problems. Yeah? Right, I'm going to go through 4 more main people. This is the last emperor. Actually, not a very handsome guy. You saw the last emperor movie down below, and the actor is very handsome, but the actual last emperor, no, by no way. I don't want to go too much into it. You can read from Wikipedia and all that. Then the Sun Yat-sen, that's the main talk we have. Now, he is the only Chinese personality in recent history that is revered and adored by all sides. Nobody can say a single bad thing about him. He's our saint, if that's the saint. I'm a Catholic, by the way. I'm a baptized Catholic, but he's our saint. So, and that's why both the communists in China and Republic of China, they all celebrate his birthday and all that. And then you have seen the Song sisters There's a movie, the movie was lousy, so don't watch it. But very few countries, very few families can boast of 3 sisters that married the 3 most powerful people in the country. Except for Mao, they didn't marry. They married Sun Yat-sen, married Chiang Kai-shek, and married Song. Yeah. So that's the 3 sisters. Yeah. So now this is Chiang Kai-shek, but the way Chiang Kai-shek is the word in Cantonese, Chiang Kai-shek. So this is not a Mandarin a name. Now he's a little bit better looking, real handsome. Now in the early days, he was following Dr. Sun Yat-sen, but later on, of course, after Dr. Sun Yat-sen died, there was the divergence between him and Mao and the communists, and later on they fought each other. Yeah. Now that's Mao. Again, I don't need to talk too much about it. When he was young, he was handsome too, but later on he got a little bit overweight. But he is famous for a few things: the Long March, the Cultural Revolution. But you know, if you ask Chinese people, but sometimes people link him together with Stalin and Hitler, but not really so. Don't ask me. I'm not from China. Ask somebody from China. Would they rate him as a total dictator, killer, whatever? Probably not. And the Chinese people like to have balance. If you ask them how many percentage, we say 多少开, they will say 73开 or 60开. That means 70% good, 30% bad, or 60% good, 40% bad. You might be shocked. You know, I don't think any German would say that Hitler was 60% good, right? So please don't be shocked if you get a Chinese person. Don't believe me. Ask a Chinese person how they will rate Mao. Unfortunately, many of the books written in America always want to portray the bad side. But one thing, he single-handedly helped to unite China for whatever reason, after killing a lot of people. But Chiang Kai-shek also killed a lot of people. So that part, the Chinese understand or accept him for unifying the country. Yeah? And he has a lot of excesses, of course. You know, we don't need to go into it. You know. Now this is the man I want to especially said a lot about. And later on, towards the end, I'll show you a couple of my, if I have any claim to fame at all tonight, a claim to fame to be able to stand in front of you is that I met this man for 90 minutes, together with an entourage. And that's 90 minutes I will never, never, never forget. And there was another person I was very privileged to also meet for 90 seconds, Pope John Paul II, twice. So those 2 people I will forever remember my meeting with them. And between them, they control half the population of the world, 1 billion each. Yeah. So he was a remarkable, remarkable little man. And I don't want to go too much into it, but just incredible. Yeah. All right, now communism. I'm coming to the end of the first part. We can now. Recently, I saw a piece of news in the internet that really shocked me. The Chinese ambassador to London, to Great Britain, said that China is not a communist country. Whoa! You know, 50 years ago he would be executed. 20 years ago he'd be sacked. But I was a diplomat for 2 years. No diplomat, any good diplomat will know which side of the bread is buttered. They are not going to say anything that's not approved, unless he's an idiot. Okay. But the ambassador is still there, so that means he's approved of saying that. What he's saying is that only the Communist Party, the rulers, are communists. The rest of the country isn't. And I always said that to my students. Or people say, oh, aren't you afraid of this? Aren't you afraid of that? I said, you know what? Whenever I go to China, last year I went there 4 times, I look around, where's communism? I couldn't find any. Where's a communist? I couldn't find one. The only thing communist is the flag. You know why? Because Chinese people care about face. After they install the flag, they're not going to be like the Russians, take it down and change it. We're just going to keep calling it that. Yeah. So, believe you and me, that at the present moment, those of you who have been to, especially Shanghai, communism, God, that's capitalism at its extreme. Hong Kong, that's capitalism at its extreme. Anything goes. Yeah. And if you are inside China, if you don't, I want to say, if you behave yourself, if you're not against the regime, you're not for certain touchy issues, nobody's going to bother you. You have, in fact, less problems than you do in, can I say, Singapore and America. Anybody from Singapore? Because we have more restrictions in Singapore. Yeah. So the only communist China is only a comma in a book like War and Peace. If 5,000 years War and Peace, you know how long War and Peace is. It's like 3,000 pages. It's only a comma. And right now, it's no turning back. Unless there's awful things happening, communism is not going to go back again. Now, the number one thing has changed China is the role of the woman. For 5,000 years, Chinese women were very backward, behind. But for the first time, they are strong. They are equal pay, and a lot of the senators or whatever they call it, congresswomen, are women, very strong. And the athletes and the mayors know that if you're negotiating in China, don't be surprised, a woman will come out. Yeah, so that's good. Greater mobility and equality among the races, classes, races. You may debate, but one of the reasons why China is so far ahead of India, I know quite a bit about India too. I grew up with Indians in Singapore and visited India a number of times. India has race, caste system, religious problems, ethnicity problems, language problems, and very fortunately China has none of these. And in China is a land of opportunity. America's land of opportunity. That if you become good, nobody cares what's your background. By the way, my father was a peasant. Yeah? So look at you don't need to be born with a silver spoon in your mouth. You don't have to go to Eton to do well. So there's no caste system, there's no class system, there's very little racial differences, at least among the Hans. Yeah? So the mobility is extremely high. And the one-child effect, that's sometimes negative. There's a lot of negative effects. But it did stop about 250 or 300 million people being born. I'm a Catholic, I should feel bad. Yeah? But can you imagine China now, 2 billion people? That's going to be hard. Yeah? So that's a part. Renewed optimism. Yeah. At least in the last 60, 62 years, China was relatively stable, except for a few hiccups, Tiananmen and Cultural Revolution and all that. But it wasn't to the breaking point, as there was China in numerous parts of the history. So that allowed the country to progress. Okay, I'm going to go into the cultural part to help you understand. That's maybe my forte, even though I'm not taught in psychology. I'm a very good observer, and I live a Chinese life. Every day I have to practice my Chinese ways and understand the behavior of Chinese people, the Chinese nation, and some of the ones that, right now, for example, I'm a great believer of Chinese medicine. I have 1,000 pricks on me on acupuncture, and it just works wonders. And it comes from this thing, qi. And qi is something that's not describable in English because you don't have the concepts. It's like ether. In physics we use the thing of ether. It's qi. It's life. It is breath. It is soul. It's everything you can think about. But it works because acupuncture works and qigong works. I'm not a medical doctor. All right. I can only tell you from my personal experience. That's one. And when I was really young, I used to think these are superstition. Yeah. These are people who are just praying and all the rest of it. But recently I was shocked as a physicist. Yeah. Do you know that the Chinese already knew the binary numbers 3,000, 4,000 years ago? That's binary number. The long stroke is a 1. The broken stroke is a 0. Understand? And there are 8 sides. And then if you multiply 8, you get 64. Your computer is what? 4K? Yeah? 8, 16K, 64K. There's no, 26K, your USB, it's the same. And if you don't believe me, for example, I've been reading about I Ching, I Ching, and this is written by Kelson Huang. You know what is his background? He's a theoretical physicist at MIT. And he's still a professor emeritus, professor in physics of MIT. So this is not a joke. His father was an I Ching expert, and he went into it. And you can Google, if there are 64 directions of the I Ching, it's the number 1 to 64. Just using the stroke 0 to 1, just like the computer says. So the Chinese already knew about binary numbers 3,000 years ago. Yeah? and even theoretical physics. I know a little about theoretical physics, nuclear physics. A lot of the particles, the yin-yang sign, when you're a particle, you have antiparticles. Any physicist here? I know my good friend Norm is here. He's not a physicist, but he's a scientist. I'm not saying that. Okay, I'm not saying that you can get the periodic table out of there, but some of the basic concepts of binary numbers and physics and theoretical physics are already predicted in the I Ching. Yeah? Go into it if you want to. We talk about feng shui, and I used to think that they're all voodoo medicine and all that. There's certain amount of it is common sense, certain amount of it is reality, certain amount of it is science. Yeah? Astrology, and today we are the dragon year. Yeah? Right, let's get to the Confucius. We cannot forget Confucius. We have Jesus Christ. I'm brought up as a Catholic, like I said, and we have Confucius. And Confucius is longer than Jesus Christ, longer, and he had 72 disciples, not 12. Yeah, and he left Chinese with a lot of things. Everything is said in the Bible. I know the Bible reasonably well. Almost everything in the Bible, except the part about God and Holy Spirit, because he's not professing a religion. He's only a philosophy. Anything about do unto you or what your neighbor will do to you, and do not whatever. All the do not, they all will be said by Confucius. And so when we say a Chinese gentleman, we call him a 君子. 君子, the second one, yeah, that is a Chinese gentleman. Yeah, maybe like Sun Yat-sen. Yeah, and then 孝 is very important. Filial piety, and it's very important to the Chinese people. 礼义廉耻. Sometimes you go to Chinatown, you see a big sign, and they will have either two. Sometimes they say 天下为公. 天下为公 is what is said by Dr. Sun Yat-sen. Sometimes they have these four words. 礼义廉耻. Yeah, but we don't always obey all of it, but this will be some of the important things. All right, these are I'm going to stop in about 5 minutes, and we can have question and answer. Now, I want to give you a cram course on some of the things that are important to the Chinese. The number one important things for the Chinese people is a very thin piece of membrane, face. All right. So I don't want to emphasize too much, but some people say, "Oh, we also have face." Yeah, I'm not saying you don't have face, but sometimes you call it principle. Yeah, but what is to you a principle to the Chinese is not a principle. But what is face to the Chinese is very important to you is, why are you worried about this? Yeah? So you have to be able to interpret, yeah, and I'm very sensitive about it. You gotta know, you have to give face. For example, just after winning, whenever I see, I'm a big sports fan, the way the football teams or whatever celebrate after they score a touchdown is not good. Every time I see somebody dancing around, whoa! Think about the linebacker. What is he thinking? I'm going to hit you real hard next time. So you have face too. But we Chinese people, after we win, oh no, I don't deserve the win. You know? I have actually met Chinese Nobel Prize winner when asked by, I actually saw this in my own eyes. I befriended a few. I'm digressing a bit, but I want to use examples to show you, so that you don't learn millions to the face. What is it? You know, it's here. You know, I actually met a number of Nobel Prize. One of them was actually asked by a news reporter. Said, "Oh, Professor so and so, what do you think? You got the Nobel Prize. You're so great. Is it all sweat or is it your talent?" You know. So some of them would say, "Yeah, I'm actually a fool." You know, and they know they are not a fool. But just officially, they would say it so that, because they're expected to say they are dumb, they got it by luck. So that's a Chinese Nobel Prize winner. But this particular Chinese Nobel Prize winner spent all his time in America. And it was very funny. He said, without changing a face, he said, "Talent." So the poor reporter said, "Oh my goodness." She couldn't write it down in the newspaper because she expected to say 99% sweat and 1% inspiration. So sometimes you can use a reverse psychology to treat the Chinese. Okay, face is important. Let them have face, give face, and keep face and give face. Always remember that. Yeah. 吃苦. I really like this because we are having a lot of economic problems now, and I have to be careful. But you look even in America, around the world. Around the world now, the BRIC nations are standing tall, strong. The number one BRIC nation is China. Next is India, but even India is 4%, China is 8% in GDP. And even along the Bay Area, we're suffering, right? And you know which ethnic group stand the strongest economically, financially now? And they don't have to tell you. The East Asians, yeah? And because it's an unmatched, incredible ability to eat bitterness. If I can leave you with one term today, you go home, you don't see in the newspaper or book, it's called eat bitterness. We all Chinese know that. 吃苦, 吃苦. It's literally eat bitterness. That means endure, suffer. Yeah? I'll tell you a story a little later. Nepotism in 中庸之道, that's, middle way, that's fine. Nepotism, that's not good. I can talk about that later. Now, the supreme human pursuit of scholarship in literature is very important. I have numerous degrees. Even when I'm young, when I was 12 years old, I wanted to get a PhD. I adored Einstein, I adored the Nobel Prize winners. And this is almost like put into our genes. And it's nothing to do with a socio-economic level. Some of the brightest students in China are from the villages, from very poor family. They study, they read with candlelight, with yodeng, with oil lamps. They have no money to buy books. They got to walk an hour to go to school. Yeah? So don't let that fool you, but this is almost in our genes. Study, study, study. We have a lot of saying, in books you can find a golden house. In book you can find a beautiful woman. We have such saying. So, all right, 天子, the son of heaven. When you criticize China for being authoritarian and Chinese tiger mom, we get to that part. Tiger mom, all of us know tiger mom. All of us have tiger moms at home. It's nothing, we don't need the books to tell us, okay? And all of us have come from authoritarian society, and some of us like it. I grew up in Singapore. I live in China, and somewhat I like some of the system, not all of it, because things work. And I have a lot of protection from, say, crime, for example, yeah, from other people exploiting me, yeah. But there's also a schizophrenic side of it. Yeah, I'm going to get into it. Right, I will name a few things. Now, I'm famous for pitting my wits against some of my friends, even some Chinese friends, and I don't want to go too much into it. So when you have a strong grounding in Chinese history and culture and psychology, when you look at something happening, whether it's a Tiananmen or something else, or renminbi appreciation, you can make a better prediction. And don't read what the newspapers always tell you, CNN or The Economist or whatever, because they are sometimes done by people who are part experts. They don't live a Chinese life. They don't live in China for a long time. They don't understand the psychology, or they need to write sensational things that their editor will approve. Yeah. So I don't have any of these burdens, so I can predict some of the things. And I don't want to go too much into it, but just let me pick a couple of them. The devaluation of renminbi, and I saw Prime Minister Zhu Rongji being asked in 1997. There was a big problem with East Asia, and the pressure that all the Economist magazine, everybody say China must devalue its renminbi. And I saw one particular time when Zhu Rongji was asked, "What are you going to deliver?" And then he turned around and said, "How many times do I have to tell you we will not devalue the renminbi?" And I knew from that moment they are not going to devalue the renminbi. Why? Faith. After the Prime Minister said so in public, he's not going to devalue. They can die, they can starve. They are not going to devalue it. And I was right. Despite all the pundits saying that they have to have the economic calculations, whatever, they suffered through it, and for the better of the country and for Hong Kong. Yeah? And I got into the SARS thing too. I was in a dinner at 2003 in my home, and the Chinese New Year 2003, and one of my friends, non-Chinese, came, and he started to say, "Oh, my good friend who is an epidemiologist," see, I couldn't even get it right, said that, "Oh, this SARS thing is going to be awful because it's multiple, it's geometric, and soon there'll be a few 100,000 deaths in China." I nodded, I gave face, I didn't say a thing. I said, it will be cured before October 1st. Why October 1st? It's a national day, all right? But the epidemiologists forgot China is an authoritarian society. It can make people do anything they want to. And it's people with 吃苦, so immediately what they did, they segregated everybody, locked out the hospitals. You can only go in, you cannot come out. All the doctors live in the hospital, nurses live in the hospital. And anybody in Singapore, they install, anybody with SARS, you have to stay at home. They install a camera in your home. You got to report every day. When they call you, they have to report in front of the camera. All right? And so, instead of killing hundreds of thousands of people, it only killed 700 in 6 months. More people died of car accident in that 6 months. All right? And it's not became a pandemic at all, just like I predicted. In fact, I booked my flight on July to go. My students were saying, oh, Professor Yip, you dare to go to China? I said, I'm not worried. It's going to be cured. And it was finished. All right? So do not calculate by economic means or by medical means when it comes to China and the Chinese people. We will do crazy things if it's necessary to win a war, to cure an epidemic. We will do anything. Yeah? So that's the part I want to emphasize. All right. Okay, now I'm going to talk a bit about the three cities, and then we can start with question and answer. All right, the three cities I know the best is Beijing, Shanghai, and Shenzhen, and they are the three most important cities, the biggest cities. And the boom in the last 20 years is just incredible. Last 30 years is just incredible. I don't want to go into it. In relatively, New York City did not grow much. Yeah? And San Francisco, whatever, just grew barely. So this is not always good because the air pollution is just atrocious. Okay, I was there in 1981. My first landing was 1981 in Beijing, and that was how it looked like. No cars. And I just took another picture almost from the same spot last year, exactly 30 years later. Yeah, and of course the buildings didn't change. The mouse portrait is still there. The words are still the same, but the number of cars are just incredible. Yeah, that was 1981. No security checks. You walk up to the planes, propeller planes, Russian planes, and now the Terminal 3 of Beijing Airport is the largest single terminal in the world. Yeah, and this was the Great Wall. If you go to the Great Wall now, you couldn't even walk past, 10 people. 100 people. Now, the California high-speed rail may not be built, but I've been riding the Chinese high-speed rail, just fantastic. But of course, the population geopolitics are different. They can do what they want. It's spectacular. It's raised the economic development. It got the families together. It's just the best thing that happened to China in the last 5 years. Yeah? And forget about the accident. It's a minor one, but the best is what is happening to economic development. All right, Shenzhen, this is taken from the internet, and this is about now. No city has ever grown from, I call it two buffalo town, from a two buffalo town to a million people city. And unlike Dubai, it's not like a one-track city. It's a multiple city with all kinds of businesses. Okay, my claim to fame again is to follow my ex-deputy prime minister, the man in the middle, to China. And then we were visiting some of the places. We were the advisors to the the special economic zone. I visited another assembly line recently that if you have an iPhone, you have a piece of Shenzhen, right? Okay, these are I'm treading a little bit onto economic. I don't want to delve too much into it. Before you accuse China of taking away all the money, China is paid only $10 to assemble your iPad, which sells for $599. This is wrong, okay? And half the money is made by Apple and American companies. Half the money is in things bought, and most of them not made in China, Korea, whatever. So the Foxconn problem is a bad problem. They have to fix it because people are dying, committing suicide, and all the rest of it. So don't say that $699 went to China. Only $10 went to China. Yeah. And this is not my statistics. These are American statistics. Okay, we got into that about renminbi appreciation. Making the renminbi appreciate is not going to solve America's problems. Believe you me, you can read about it. Bashing China is not going to help the problem. The problem is much deeper than that. It has to do with productivity, has to do with Wall Street, has to do with all kinds of stuff. Yeah? It's not just a renminbi. You raise the renminbi, same with Japan. You raise the Japanese yen, it didn't solve the deficit problem. It's not a silver bullet. Right? Shanghai, now my favorite city, that was what it looked like, and this is how it looked like now. This is how old Shanghai is. If you're from Chicago, the 1930s, Chicago and Shanghai is the same. And for a brief period, Shanghai had a very bad history when it was occupied by Japan. That was me in 2011, and this is Pudong. And you know, they're very nice. They kept all the buildings, and many of them were built by the Jews who escaped from Russia and from Germany. And many of these buildings, when I first visited in 1981, has the Star of David on top of them. Yeah? Some of the richest people in Shanghai, in old Shanghai, were Jews from Russia and from Germany. Yeah. And I visited, I met my, a fateful night, I met my wife's family in 1981 in December. Yeah? And then the next night I went to, being a Christian, I went to Christmas Mass, and this is what I saw in the Mass. And this is 1981, they already opened up the churches. Just briefly on Sichuan earthquake, and we stop. I went to Sichuan to help out USGS, and it was just incredible. I'm giving you a summary of 4 or 5 different talks. So this is another talk I give about a Sichuan earthquake. But 80% of the building were gone. 7,000 to 10,000 people of this 20,000 people city died there. And I was able to get a special permit to go down that day. And this is my family. After I saw the picture, I didn't see. I used to think my family is very beautiful and handsome. It was an awful picture. Why? We just realized that we have just spent 4 or 5 hours walking in the valley of death. Have you ever been to a place where you know that people are buried still inside? It's like walking through the movie studio in LA, you know, and then there are 7,000 people still buried in there. And that's what Beijing was like. And that's the city at the back. And now they are not reconstructing it. They're keeping it as it is, as a museum, because it's impossible. Look at this. It's going to fall down again. You see all these are all avalanche. Understand? These are pieces of the mountain that fell down. No building is going to survive if the earthquake comes again. Even a modern building like this, not going to survive. So they have abandoned this city. The only city in the world that's abandoned because of the earthquake. All right, we're going to talk about some problems of China, but okay, why don't we have the intermission? Exactly 1 hour. Is it a good time to have intermission? Yeah, we have intermission, have question and answer. After the question and answer, I will let you be more relaxed. I'll speak slower. I'll lead you through some beautiful slides of Silk Road and China. So at the moment we have an intermission, and then we can take some questions and answers.
So just like 5 minutes?
Yeah, 5 minutes. Yeah. Well,
okay.
Don't leave. You want?
Maybe, or do you just want to take a break, or do you guys just want to keep going with questions?
You want to start giving questions?
Let's just keep. But I'm going to ask if you could stand over here, because that's where the feedback. So
okay.
You won't block the screen. It's okay. And then Bruce, you can turn up the volume. Okay, once he moves over here, right?
Well, maybe I can answer 1 or 2 verbal questions first before you write down. Yeah.
I have some questions right here.
Oh, okay, fine.
We're good.
Yeah.
How soon do you believe that Taiwan will become part of China?
Well, Taiwan is now part of China. Please don't get it wrong. Even the Republic of China regime never said that it's not part of China. So what you're saying is the reunification of China. When you read both languages, sometimes you say, wow, why are they writing that? For example, when I was watching 1997, the Hong Kong, CNN, in English it say, the handover of China. And in Chinese it said, 香港回归. In Chinese it says the return of Hong Kong. But they lie to you. In English it say the handover of Hong Kong. So the truth is it's the return of Hong Kong. So nobody in Taiwan, except the Taiwan's independent movement people, would say that Taiwan is not a province of China. So when you read American press, it always says the word renegade, the renegade province. Ask Ma Ying-jeou, did he say it's a renegade province? No. Now, the reunification, I'm an optimist. I have a friend here who don't think so, but I think in my lifetime, in the next 20 years, it'll be reunified, especially after Ma Ying-jeou won again. Mr. Ma Ying-jeou won the presidency again of Taiwan this month. And he is blue camp, that means Kuomintang. The green camp is the democratic movement who wants Taiwan independence. and they are mainly by the local Taiwanese speaking people, which, by the way, a language I speak fluently, well. So when they try to tell me that they are different, I said, how come I could speak your language if you're so different? You know, it's like Northern Ireland, you know, a little bit like Northern Ireland. So I would say within 20 years, because it's going to be economics that drive the reunification. Because right now, more than 1 million Taiwanese are living in China, especially in Kunshan and Shanghai and all over China, and have families there. So it's, in this particular election, most of the tycoons, it's a Chinese word, 大款, yeah, flew back to Taiwan to personally, Foxconn person especially, to go and campaign for Ma Ying-jeou. They know which side of their bread is heavily buttered, China side, all right? So there is no obstacles at all I see. It's only, and can I predict? I'm always predict. I predict there will be one country, 3 systems. Deng Xiaoping said 1 country, 2 systems for Hong Kong. And I think they are going to make a deal. What did the mafia say? Make Taiwan an offer they can't refuse. Right? Now, it's only my talk, okay? Any Chinese embassy people here? Taiwan consulate? I'm safe, okay? Let's say I'm ruler of China. I say, I make an offer you cannot refuse. What? You keep your police, you keep your army, keep your currency, keep your so-called presidency, but only 1 seat in the UN, 1 flag. You can call yourself, right now in the Olympics, they're called what? Chinese Taipei. It's already done. Chinese Hong Kong, Chinese Taipei. You see? So I'm quite optimistic. Okay, next question.
So one of the pictures, it showed no cars, and the next picture showed a lot of cars. And so this is something that, how do you see the increase of meat eating in China? So, and how will that affect what's the price of rice, and how will that affect the world's food supply?
Yes, that's a very good question, actually. It's not so called tough, but then it is good. About a year ago, I think Wall Street Journal, whichever, lined up the 10 items of Hangzhou, and then listed 10 from Boston. And guess what? 7 of the items that was more expensive in Hangzhou, China, than in Boston. That's dollar to dollar, not to do with purchasing power. If you put purchasing power in, that's even worse. Yeah? So it's not good. And let me tell you, the Communist Party are well aware of it. What is the Communist Party most afraid of? Again, no Chinese embassy people. They are afraid of one word. It's called luan. What is luan? Unrest. Yeah? So how did they come into power? They come into power through unrest, through peasants' revolts, through people who are disenfranchised. So now, the last thing they want to do. So if you always have the idea the communists don't care, you are wrong. The communists care more than any other government in the world, because their legitimacy is not from voting, you know, because voting does not necessarily guarantee that the person do what they want, but it is the strength that's underground. If they're enough, they're now already not quite riots, but demonstration in factories with people with food, or people who get run over by red BMWs, you know, and not being arrested. And the micro bloggers are blogging, and they're showing pictures of people with top officials with expensive Rolex watches, with cigarettes. They put in microblog, and these people get sacked. So there's a lot of internet democracy which you didn't know about. The last thing they want is unrest. So food prices, meat eating is not good. We're seeing fatty Chinese now. I'm very good. Most Chinese are very good, older Chinese, but now the kids are getting plump. Something like 25% of the kids in Beijing are obese now, and they're catching up. Sorry, no thanks to your fast food. Okay, well, it's one child and fast food. So it's going to, China is now the largest producer of carbon dioxide already, which is not good. And cars, I don't like it because they're not. I love being Chinese, but they're the most awful drivers in the world. And I had to drive 7 years in China, and I'm still in one piece. I'm very happy. So my question is, I'd like to see the meat eating lowered. I turned vegetarian 2 years ago. Lower the meat eating and lower the car population. Yeah.
Well, you just mentioned pollution, and I was also thinking about my iPhone. And so I guess I have kind of two questions. One is, China has more people, but they also produce most of what we purchase here in the United States, and they produce a lot of pollution in the world. What is the government going to do about that, or how do they feel about that?
My son is majoring in energy and atmospheric science in Stanford, and I kind of helped to push him into that. So I'm a greenie myself, but I like to emphasize I'm not a tree hugger, so it's not that bad. I'm a greenie. I drove a Prius and all the rest of it. So yes, China has a huge environmental problem. In fact, my son gave a speech at my Rotary Club exactly on Chinese environmental problems. We need to solve the problems because right now, if you look at the Google Earth map, almost the whole of China, except parts of Xinjiang and Tibet, are clear. It's just a huge cloud hanging there all the time, and it's bad. And that's one thing I would tell the Chinese rulers, if I can see them, to say, you better solve it because you cannot escape from it. You can escape from the traffic jam, you can escape from the bad food, bad vitamins, but you breathe the same air. And by the way, it took American-born Chinese to put this on the map. Governor Locke, who is now ambassador to China, he started microblogging the 0.25 micron, below 0.25 micron pollutions in Beijing. Because in the past, the Beijing Environmental Agency only tell you what is above 0.25. But it's the micro ones that really kill you, that are worse. My son developed asthma, my second son developed asthma, living in Beijing. Thank God he's very good now, very well now. However, so started microblogging now, so that caught the Chinese attention. Because to talk about shame, face, the worst thing you want is a compatriot, a fellow Chinese coming from America to tell you that you are polluting the world, because that's doubly shameful for one of our own kind to be telling us. So I will see they are conscious about it. And the Foxconn, sometimes I take the Chinese side, say that you're Chinese bashing, but the Foxconn side, I think they better do something about it. Because the suicide, there are too many. I've worked in labs before. Trichloro and some of the things are deadly. It kills your kidney, kills your liver, and it's not good. So I don't want you to boycott it, but you should write some letters to Apple to have them pay more and to get on, pay more. The problem is partly Apple's. You know why? Apple goes there and say, produce this in 90 days. You've been reading about it, right? What is the Chinese going to do? They want your business. So they wake people up and make them work 24 hours a day. It's because you wanted it. You and I wanted it. So we are part of the problem. Yeah? Don't boycott Apple, but write them and tell them you're concerned. But then you're willing to pay more though, okay? You must be willing to pay. Like fair trade coffee, fair trade, or what? Fair trade iPhones. How about that? Okay.
Last question, because how long is your slideshow?
I need another 20 minutes or another last question.
Okay,
because we can have another Q&A.
Because you've talked a lot about Western people being influenced in Western countries and coming back to China and bringing those ideas. And so the Chinese education system relies heavily on testing. And is individually valued when educating children in China?
That's a very good question. I often said that I tell my sons, it's bad when you get the manager say, when I was your age, they say, oh yeah, okay, we heard that before, And I still tell them, I said, son, you think your exams are bad? The two worst exams in my life, the hardest exams in my life, was my high school exam in Singapore and my PhD exam. Nothing in between. The rest is just easy, picnic in park, But there's something to be said about rote memory. Any mathematicians here, any physicists here, some things you have to remember. I've seen people, I buy and, sometimes you need to calculate, like say, when you buy a house, you need 3% down on, whatever. So like a $100,000 house or $15,000, $150,000 house, and it's 3%. Okay, it's $4,500. Yeah. So this person said, oh, turn on his iPhone, said, let me check. I said, isn't it $4,500? So I just want to be sure. Okay. So when you grow up with not even rudimentary multiplication tables, spell check, and now I've been reading blogs. My English is not bad. I was taught by the British. I'm appalled at the spelling, the grammar. You know, here's my joke. Everything starts up with, what's up? Dude. OMG. If they could only eliminate these 3 terms, we would save carbon dioxide from the world and so on. Kids can't write, can't spell, can't multiply anymore. So rote memory is somewhat good. However, from my 2 sons, I would see the first son coming back at 11 was a very good time. I would not come after a bachelor's degree. And I've taught the same class, project management, exact same module, same paper, same test, all over the world, literally, in Europe, in New Zealand, in China, in Taiwan, in Singapore, whatever. And I have to admit, and I've taught about 3,000 such students, 3-day class, 3,000 students. The best students I ever remember being spontaneous, being able to be creative, were non-Chinese. That's not to say the Chinese are dumb, but that comes from rote memory, and partly also because Confucius thinking and said, well, you don't want to speak up. You don't want to say something different because you make a fool out of yourself. You know, silence is not golden in America, but silence is golden in China. So I would say the combination between the 2. By the way, I come from Singapore. For many, many, many years, the #1 test takers in the world, by far, you know that, is some tests, math and science, #1. I come from that system. And now one city overtook us, Shanghai. That's the city of my wife's family. So I'm very familiar with these 2 cities, and these are people. So the best is to have some part of rote memory, but have creativity. Now that's why the best creators, creative people in the Bay Area, we live in the creative area. Many of us are not born in America. Not that American borns are not good, Steve Jobs, Bill Gates, but then you have Jerry Yang, you have other people, Zuckerberg is American born. You have Brim and other people, the Google people, Steve Chen, all they are the first generation after the immigrant group. And because they have the 吃苦, what's 吃苦? Eat bitterness. They have the eat bitterness, the hard work, the thrift, but they also have the creativity. I think that's the best combination. Yeah? Okay, good. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, let me go on and I'll be more relaxed and show you some of my...
A little break here?
Maybe not good. If we have a break, people will go fast. Yeah. Okay, is that okay? Okay, now we'll be more serene. I have written a few books, and one of my best, my hardest book is called Ethnic Groups of China. Not to sell the book, and no more for sale. It's out of print, and it is about 55 ethnic groups, minorities in China, plus the Han, 56, and they are all over China. They are about 8% of Chinese population, and some of the major ones are the Mongolians, Tibetans, Hui are the Islamic Muslim people, and the Zhuangs and the Miao. These are Dai people. They are exactly the brothers and sisters of the Thai people in Chiang Mai, not the ones in Bangkok. They are a little bit more Malayanized. They are darker and all that. But if you go to Chiang Mai, they will be just across the border from the Dai people. These are Shui Dai, water Dai people. Yeah? And these are photographed by me. Yeah? These are Yi and Honey, and they are most beautiful. And you want to take pictures of the women, not just because they're beautiful, but they have the most ornate, costumes and silverware and headdress, and from top to toe. Just incredible. And I was very lucky in 1986, I went with my wife to Xishuangbanna, which is right at the border with Burma and Laos and Thailand. And when I was there, it was like a Disneyland of minorities. Nobody wore jeans in those days. Now it's probably McDonald's, Starbucks, because they flew planes in. Once they started flying planes in. That's awful. But it was just magnificent. These were the people I took were there. And I can give a 90-minute talk on this, but I'm not going to do it. All right, these are Tibetans, not in Tibet. These are the Labarongsi. Labarongsi is outside Lanzhou, 1,000 miles from Lhasa. So also don't think of Tibetans living nicely here, Mongolians living nicely here. There's a lot of mergers of different minorities. Just like here, the Latins don't just live in Arizona, they're among us. and the blacks and whatever, the same in China. There are a lot of intermingling, and there are Hui people, leftovers from Arabians, Persians, that were traders along the Silk Road. Later on, talk a little about the Silk Road. So they are the Hui Zhao. These are the two people. Right, the Silk Road is one of my expertise. I used to give a lot of talks on the Silk Road, and this is my opening paragraph. I'll let you read a little bit and while I sip a drink. And it starts with Chang'an, which is Xi'an, and this is Dunhuang, which is, I'm a consultant at Dunhuang Academy, and it splits up into the northern route and the southern route, and this is an impassable desert, Taklamakan. And it goes into all the stans right now, all the Kazakhstan, Tajikistan, whatever, and then it comes out of with Turkey and Iran, and then it goes by ship to Venice, the other end. It's about 7,000 miles. And by the way, the land route of it goes into, some of them goes into Afghanistan, and then goes to India and the rest of it. Afghanistan figured very highly, very strongly in the Buddhist transmission of Buddhism and the Silk Road. The Silk Road started because Zhang Chen, at that time, he was the Marco Polo of China. He was the Kissinger of China, sent by Han Wudi to talk peace with the barbarians. We Chinese are awful. We call everybody non-Chinese barbarians, you know. So all the barbarians, because they're always invading us, taking our horses, raping our women, taking our food and everything. So asked him to go to become a shuttle diplomacy. However, soon after he left Chang'an, he went into the desert, he was captured. And here comes a Zhiku. He did not resist, he did not fight, he did not commit suicide. He adapted and lived there for 10 years. And he married a local woman. And 10 years later, he got his opportunity. There were problems. Somebody died, and there were chaos. He escaped with his wife and son, his newly born son. And he continued on, and he went back whatever years to Han Wudi. And he became known as being the person who opened up the Silk Road. Why? For the first time, it was east, west, and west. Now, neither of them were going to correspond. So he opened up the trade route so people could travel all the way from Chang'an, which is Xi'an now, with silk or spices or porcelain or whatever, and go all the way over there and bring back silver or whatever by barter trade or whatever. Yeah? So that's called the Silk Road, and it lasted the longest time. Imagine, that was before seafaring, ocean-faring ships were around. You couldn't have a small boat to ship anything from Rome to China or China to Rome. So everything must go through the Silk Road. That was the information superhighway, you know, without Al Gore, all right? So there was a Chinese information superhighway. Okay, I brought 4 teams to go, and this was one of the teams I went. And when I showed my Chinese friend, oh, it's okay, I've seen this before. Can I give a little test? Because I give a lot of lectures, I want to test my students. What is so different about these terracotta people, even the Chinese people? What's so different that you haven't seen? I guarantee you haven't seen one like that before. What? No? No? All the ones you saw were soldiers and warriors. These were mandarins. 这是文官，不是武官，对吧? So all the ones you saw has got spears, got whatever, but this is with long rope. Why? Because the soldier cannot have long rope, because how can they fight? Yeah, the people with long rope, they hide, they keep their hands warm, and they do this kota. Why? Because this was dug up from pit number 6 within half a mile of the actual tomb, which I'm going to show you. Who's been to Qing tomb, terracotta soldiers? Okay, now I don't think you went here. Let me show you. Did you see this? Can you imagine where the arrow is pointing? That's the actual tomb of Qin Shi Huang, our #1 emperor. It's incredible. It's like finding Tutankhamun's grave not dug up. It's not dug up. Why? Because Sima Qian, our greatest historian, said he was buried with a sea of mercury He collected all the mercury, liquid mercury, and gemstone like the constellations, yeah. And his body is there. And then what did they do? Here's back to my physics. They actually drill holes. I think with some Berkeley professor, physics professor, they went to drill holes in the center of it, and they found the mercury level peak like 100,000 times. So, okay, it's not quite proof, but you have background mercury, right? If we dig on here, it will be mercury or whatever. But if you have that much mercury there, that means there is raw mercury down below, yeah? And they didn't see any drilling, any tomb robbing, and it will be incredible if this is ever dug up. But my prediction, it will not be dug up anytime soon. Why? Nobody dares to dig it up. Because Chinese people are still superstitious. Okay. What do you gain from digging it up? Nothing. What happens if there's an earthquake, there's a financial disaster, somebody got assassinated? You'll be blamed. So it's better not dig it up. So I don't think, well, even besides that, there's a problem of preservation because it is completely free of oxygen, right? Once you dig it up, things will crumble. Yeah? So this is something which is incredible to be dug up because he was a brutal dictator. He collected, he unified, he was the first emperor that unified China. That's why he called himself Qin Shi Huang. Shi Huang means the beginning, the original emperor. Yeah? He's not the first emperor, but he called him the first one because he's the first one who united China. And there's nobody around. He conquered everybody else. Yeah, so his tomb is most likely undug and might be a mummified body. And that will be the archaeological discovery of the 21st century, the number one. Well, we hope one day. All right, get to my, my favorite topic about Dunhuang. And who's been to Dunhuang here? Some of you. All right, very few. Many people go to too. But let me, if I can leave you with one small encouragement, it's the best kept travel secret in China, if not the world. If you are like me, you love art, religion, culture, history, go there. It is like 1,000 years. The way I characterize it, it's like you have 1,000 years, you have a Smithsonian, you have a museum, you have a library, God forbid. Yeah, if this library contains 1,000 years of books, and then one day it was frozen over. 1,000 years later, you discover the library again. Can you imagine what's inside? And that's what's in Dunhuang. For 1,000 years, people were carving and drawing paintings on these mile-long 492 caves for more than 1,000 years. Not just Buddhist drawings, about history, about religion, about science. There was a first star atlas in there. There's geography there. There's history there. There's science there. And then it became dormant for 1,000 years because the Silk Road died. Ships started going. Nobody cared about the Silk Road. But 1900, it was rediscovered, and a worse time because China was at its weakest 1900. And then came the British, the German, the French, the Russians, even Americans, explorers, archaeologists. And they came. Now here you go, I have to take the middle ground. The Chinese say raped and plundered Dunhuang and took them all back. But I'll say something to the Chinese. In a way, you're lucky they did it, because every piece that's taken away by at least the Western archaeologists are still there at the basement of the British Museum, at the Louvre, and at Guimet. My French is no good. At Guimet Museum downstairs, uncatalogued in boxes and boxes. But the ones taken by the Chinese were sold, destroyed. Don't know where. So I don't want to say we thank them. A little bit like Hong Kong, when people blame, Hong Kong for being taken away for 150 years. Hey, they gave back you a child as a teenager, which is fat and well-educated and prosperous, And for 150 years, Hong Kong was the window to China, So the same, and I'm partly helping them for the last 20 years to digitize, to help the cultural bridge and artistic bridge and all that. And I will highly, if you are running out of places to go, you've been to Hawaii 10 times, Rome and all the rest, take one single trip to Dunhuang and the Silk Road. You will be, if you're like me, your jaws will drop. It's the way I describe it, it's like 1,001 Nights life. That's the best way of describing it. Yeah, Arabian Nights life. And this is one of the most beautiful Guanyin things. And I say this and people laugh. I see cave drawings with Gucci bags, Louis Vuitton bags, with things. And this Tiffany would be very pleased at this design. They could easily copy it. So nothing is new now. I don't want to say the Chinese have done it before, but there's certainly a lot of things in there that we have done before. The hairdo, we saw pictures of people who looked like Japanese, but they were not. They were Tang women. Okay, we didn't have photography then, but we have pictures, beautiful pictures, painted, color pictures on the wall. Yeah, and this is just remarkable. You don't have to be a Buddhist to go. If you are interested in archaeology, in culture and history, just go. Your jaws will drop, your eyes will pop out. You know. But please, read before you go. It's not something you can just, oh, that's nice. It's something you should read up, bone up. Send me an email if you want to. I'll show you a few books, buy a few books. If you want to buy a book, make sure it has the Dunhuang Academy Adobe mark on it. Because only then the pictures are genuine and the stories are right and the research is right, because they're the authority. These are some of the caves. There are 500,000 square foot of painting. They will make any other grottos look cheap. 500,000. And some of the caves are this size. Most are like a hotel room. The biggest one is like an auditorium. And they are all from top to bottom except the floor. It's ornately painted. And it's not broad stroke. It's minute, small paintings and carving. Just incredible. All right, we are hoping to digitize to keep it before it degrades more. Yeah, we are hoping. I'm very proud to belong to it. I belong to a Friends of Dunhuang organization. I've been very active. 4 times we brought people there, and later on I have some newsletter. It's now merged into a Dunhuang Foundation. Yeah, it's non-governmental, it's non-profit, and this person is now the chairwoman. And you notice the famous name, Mimi Gates, is the stepmother of Bill. Yeah, and he's Chinese-speaking art director, PhD in Eastern art from Seattle, and she's now our official chairwoman, and she helped to raise a few million already. And we're very proud, very happy that she's our chairperson. And this is Jerry Yang. Well, he's kicked out of Yahoo, but he's got $1 billion. We don't mind. And the other people, Mellon Foundation, all that, just the best, the most intellectual, the proudest people we have association with. And I'm very proud to be associated. And that took a lot of my time in the last 20 years. And I'm forever a friend of Dunhuang advocate. I give a fantastic talk on the Silk Road. I don't want to bore you. There's some of the pictures. These are the spices from Asia that is shipped back on the Silk Road. And if you saw the Kite Runner, the movie, you saw this mosque. The Kite Runner was not filmed in Afghanistan. Why? It was too dangerous. So it was filmed in Xinjiang, China. Yeah? So that was part of the movie. We know about Buddhism. Buddhism was carried from India to China via Afghanistan. The back way, because you couldn't take a ship back. And you couldn't go to the forest. You couldn't go to the Himalayas. So he walked through Afghanistan, back to the Silk Road, back down to Chang'an, and he spent his life in the pagoda to translate from Sanskrit into Chinese. And that's where, if you're Japanese Koreans, thank this person, because you got the Buddhism from Tangsen. He's a very famous monk in our history. And make a good story, Journey to the West. It's a famous story, our cartoons. And Marco Polo also came by the Silk Road, but I think he sailed back. But this is another story you can go into. Okay, I'm going to spend just 7 more minutes. I'm getting a little bit off track, but I'm just going to, I have about 20, 30 pictures, but just for you to enjoy. And I'm going to speak slowly, and there's no wordings there to distract you. This is my first night at the Beijing hotel. Very memorable hotel. Inkpot, December 7th, 1981. Little did I know that this trip was going to change my life, because by that time I knew nothing about China, but that was a fateful trip that I went to China that ignited my lifelong interest in China and Chinese. This is during the Olympics, and not Photoshop. None of my pictures are Photoshop, okay? And they're all from old-fashioned slides. I should have brought a slide. And they're, sorry to say, they're still the best. Some people don't believe it. Yeah, if we could turn off these, yeah, wonderful, beautiful, fantastic. Do you know who this woman is? Do you know who this man is? That's the true last emperor. And this is his last wife. I think it's Li Suxian. And I was going to write a book on women of China, and I was about to interview her, and she was a very sad, she's still alive, she was a very sad widow, because he died very soon after they married as a commoner, and she was holding on. And this was the spectacle cases of his. And I interviewed her for about an hour. I took some pictures of her. So this is the last wife of the last emperor. This is Anna Chenault, Chen Xiangmei, and she was Mrs. Chenault. You know Mrs. Chenault of Flying Tigers fame, Mrs. Chenault? I wish they'll make a movie. Talk about a great movie. They should make a movie on Flying Tigers. They now a Tuskegee movie now. Why don't they make a Flying Tigers movie in IMAX? That would be lovely, because you have history, you have geography, you have fighting, you have war, you have politics, and you can have a little bit of sex in there too. Okay. So that would be fantastic. She was a very young woman, married General Chenault, who is much older than she was, and he died after they came back. And
when did you take this picture?
in Washington, D.C., when I went to interview her.
She was my high school classmate.
Oh, wonderful. I should know. Wonderful. This is in the Watergate complex. Watergate complex. Yeah. You okay?
Sorry.
Okay, sorry. No. This is, who can recognize this person? This is Han Su-ying. I think she just passed away. Who wrote Love is a Many Splendid Thing. My house has 2 doors or 3 doors or whatever. Destination Chongqing. She was a very prolific woman writer. Her father was Chinese. Her mother was Belgian. She was a lover of a great patriot of China. I interviewed her in Beijing Hotel, Peking Hotel. Okay, these are less famous people, but my I'm lucky in a sense, because I spent most of my life, adult life, in America, in the Western world. I've got a little bit of a photographic eye from the Western point of view, so that I'll take things that someone Chinese says, why are you doing this? Why are you taking this? Why are you taking a picture of the bicycle? Why are you taking the wall? You know, but hopefully some of these pictures will also make sense to you. And this is the heart and the feeling of 2 very common girls who are serving us in a hotel. But behind her is a picture of a Hong Kong actress. All right? And she was looking at my airline magazine, my Singapore Airline magazine. This is back in 1980s, where China was not very open up then. Can you tell me the significance of this picture? These are bound feet, the last of the bound feet women. There are probably none or as many as First World War veterans left. They are about the same time, same age if they are alive, because right after the 1911 is pretty much banned, and so you will have to be 90 or 100 years old to have bound feet. And this is 20 years ago, one of the last ones. So this is a granddaughter with her big feet and these little shoes. And hers is not the smallest. There are some even smaller, 3 inches. There, 3寸青年. Yeah. Awful, awful. One of the awful traditions. Here's our women soldiers. Yeah, and they are the unsung heroines too, because they serve. This is Suzhou before it became metropolis. Yeah, and I love kids. I love kids, and Women, they are make the most interesting subjects and objects. Men are not interesting. You know? They are only interesting if they're rich or powerful. But other than that, not so interesting. You know? I love this. You know, my Chinese, where are you taking these poor kids? The line says that you're prohibited to hawk, you know, sell things in front of the school. Otherwise, you will be severely fined 1 yuan, $1. Now, it's very hard. Unfortunately for me, as a photographer, it's very hard to find such scenes anymore. Why? I don't want to say there are very few poor people, but you're going to be very hard pressed to find people with broken up, you know, clothes like that. Even in Northwest, where I go very often, which is very poor. The Northwest is the poorest part of China. It's still very hard to find. They don't have Starbucks yet, but you know, it's very hard to find people with no shoes, you know, or very destitute like that. Somebody want to buy this picture from me. Wonderful picture. You know, it's typical Chinese. There's no micro order, but there's macro order. There's another picture I say is Chineseness. You know, from the outside we are united, but down inside we all. So this is in Shenzhen, but you won't find this in Shenzhen now. You'll probably have Mercedes Benzes line up. You know. Here's another ironic picture I took. Some of the peasants made a lot of money. They decided they don't know what to do, so they built a Disneyland and some castle, and nobody came. And the water buffalo was saying, "What are you doing here?" Oh, here's another thing. My son is actually in this car that I was a general manager and I had an Audi A6, a fantastic car, and sitting in there, I came down and took this picture. This is now a super highway going to the Great Wall, and to make people obey the speed limit, they put a plastic policeman there. So you see, there again another Chinese trick. It's form, not substance. If you want to interpret the Chineseness, is that we care about form. We don't care about substance. See? Here's another ironic picture I took. Now this is near the factory I ran. And there are people at the back, they are reasonably poor. And they buy, this is one of the most popular pictures in restaurants in China. Where's this? Yeah, Keukenhof in Amsterdam. There are tulip factories. They have the faintest idea where it is, but they like the picture. Well, at least they're not pictures of Kim Kardashian or somebody there, you know. So this is really strange. For me, with my eyes, my Chinese and American eyes, I see funny things, you know. Gee, you know, why would they behave that way, you know? Oh, here's a very Chinese picture. Yeah, it's like a Chinese painting. So bamboo shadows on some goldfish side of a wall. I love this one. Yeah, this signifies Chineseness. The Chinese love bamboo. Why? It can bend with the wind. It's very hard by itself, but it's not going to be blown down by the wind. It would go, and that's our character. Yeah, bend with the wind. Yeah. I love this picture. This is my contribution. Very good. The Shell chairman of Singapore bought this picture from me, and he wrote me a very nice letter, which I kept. I said, "Your picture reminds me of a Dutch painter. You know, it's like a little bit like a painting. Yeah, just look at you can see a little bit of the bottom and a little bit out here. It's just, you know." And here's another picture, very ironic, yeah, because it looks like it's detached. It's not Photoshop. I didn't put it in. I didn't cut this. This is like an alien. This is like a super modern thing, and this is our hotel. And out there was a creek and a nice jungle in Zhuhai. We were living in a very posh hotel. Small Chinese. This is a Ming tombs. For you to tell you how to gauge how important. How do you gauge how important a building is when you are in Beijing or Shanghai? Can anybody tell me? That's right. How many little weird devils. They are at the eaves. Here, yeah. Little animals there. The top is how many?
I don't know. 7?
Sorry, 9. Yeah. So if you go to the Beijing Forbidden Palace, the door, when you open the red door, it has 9 knobs. No, don't put any. You can only have 1 knob in your home. Huh? If you have 9 knobs, you will have your head cut off. Okay. But that only belongs to the emperor. Yeah. 9, 7, 8. There will be more junior, and if a very junior mayoral, it will be maybe 3 or 4 of these animals there. So you could tell them from far away how important this building is. 9 is the top. Yeah. I went to the Beijing Ballet and photographed some ballerina with no flash, no iPhone, slides. I'll never forget. I took a train into Shanghai in a deep cold December in 1981, and this is the first thing I saw in a train station. And never did I know that that particular trip was going to change my life. And I dated my future wife, and we went to the Peace Hotel, and this is one of the scenes back in 1981 in Peace Hotel. It doesn't look anything like that now. Okay, it's much more modern now. This is one of my best. This is a rice paddy field in Sichuan, near the birthplace of Deng Xiaoping. Yeah, and a terrace field, and again, no photoshopping. Yeah. Yeah, most people like to take lotus when they're in full bloom. This is the yin side of it. That's the yang side. The yin side. Dead lotus leaf. But if there's no winter, how is it going to have spring? And how is it going to have summer? Yeah. So it's yin and yang. You have to go in a cycle, and it made very good. It looks like Chinese script. It looks like Chinese writing.
What are the wires?
They're not wires. They're reflection of the stems. You know, the lotus is like that, right? It stands like that. Yeah. Well, after it dies, hangs down, and that gives the. There's no wires here. Yeah. These are all the reflection. This is the reflection of what this is. Yeah. I say Chinese traffic. Yeah. It's all, these are koi in a pond. Yeah.
Oh, wow, that's cool.
Yeah, koi in a pond. Yeah. This is in Hangzhou Qiandao. I should not forget, Inner Mongolia, the Silk Road, one of the greatest imports were the Arabian horses from the Stans. The Chinese have short, stubby horses. They're not good. They don't look good. They don't run fast. They're not good for battle. So one of the greatest imports through the Silk Road to China are these Arabian horses. Yep. Oh, I love this picture. The only picture I can boast it should belong to a National Geographic. I went to a Urumqi kindergarten. These Uyghur people, this one of the major minorities, they are Muslims, and they are the cutest people in the world. They really look like Eurasians, you know what I'm saying? Like if a Chinese married a Caucasian, they just look like them. And they're the cutest kids. The whole day we were laughing, the way they're all song and dance. They're born to sing, they're born to dance. They're born to be fantastic people. And the next picture too.
Wow.
I've taken Miss Universe and all that, and she must be one of the most beautiful ones I've ever taken. And she's a Uyghur too, a Uyghur actress. Yeah. Okay, I'm going to finish with last 4. Now, I always find irony when I see things and take picture of it. I saw this in Chengdu, in a square, where this is of course Dr. Sun Yat-sen. And you have been introduced to him, handsome man, Liu Xiang. So this is what? Modern China, super modern China. Yeah? So he was the one who brought China from a weak nation to a strong nation, and he really put China and Chinese on the map. Yeah? If you've been to Chengdu, you have seen one of the largest Chairman Mao statues in China. Is in the middle of the People's Square in China. And there again, if you're a professional photographer, I beg your pardon, you don't always get afraid of shooting against the light. And here's a fantastic picture, shooting against the light. It would be much better than if I shot with the light. It would not be, and it's unquestionable Mao. Yeah? and the way he was doing the thing, and it's just incredible. It's one of my best pictures. Although I'm going to finish with 2 more pictures that is, may I claim fame. And this is one of the pictures I took during that 90 minutes. He was speaking, and I only had the first 5 minutes to take, and I was very, very lucky. And maybe it's the adrenaline and all that. I was able to take some of the best pictures I have done in my life for any VIP. And the next one is just when he died in 1990, whatever. I sent these 2 pictures via my good friend who knows the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in China to the son Deng Pufang of Deng Xiaoping, the son of Deng Xiaoping. And he wrote me a nice letter back. Thank you for your pictures. And I'm seriously hope, now I know somebody who knows the daughter to Deng Nan, and I hope my biggest contribution is if they can use this in one of the books commemorating the Deng Xiaoping, this great little small man of China. And with that, I should end. And I would like to, if you allow me 30 seconds to dedicate my talk to my wife and her family, who has really inspired me to be so intimately into China for the last 30 years, and to my 2 sons who were born outside China, one in America, one in Brussels. And I hope they will be, like his father, act as a bridge between China and America. Thank you very much.